So hello everyone, welcome. This is Charles Rayburn. I am a customer success advocate here at ServiceNow. We have these office hours and have been doing them since the start of this year. This is office hour number 16, and it's due to the topics that you as customers bring up in your conversations with your success advocates and your check-ins quarterly or monthly. So just remember, as you bring up specific needs, make sure to remind them in your conversations. How well did you like the last office hour? If there's other topics you want to see, we'll try to make that happen. But today's office hour is going to be a two-part mini-series. So session number one, all about GRC, planning and aligning for GRC implementation. We have two rock star subject matter experts here, Rick Smith and Joggin, who are going to go, who's going to go over a couple of key areas. They are practitioners in this area. Some of you may have already talked with them due to some special setups that we had, like one-on-one sessions, things like that. So the goal of these office hours is to cover the topic during the first 20 minutes, where the subject matter expert will talk about the topic, lay the groundwork. And the remaining time in the phone call is all about questions you as customers may have in that topic to either other customers who are leveraging the area in particular, or just to those subject matter experts. So feel free to chime up. As questions start coming in, we'll start with, you could just go ahead and start asking the question within the conference call, or you can raise your hand and just submit it via the chat and I'll moderate it for you guys. We do record these sessions. So if there were people that you had invited that were unable to attend, you could send that recording to the rest of your staff. If there are any other questions that you may have thought about after the call, just go ahead and ping me and I'll send those over to the subject matter expert to try to get some answers for you. But this is the first session, and we are going to have a second session afterwards. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the ball over to Rick and Joggin. So go ahead, Rick. You guys have.
Good morning. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I did not know these sessions are so popular. So big congratulations to the success that Charles has been having on this. And we're so honored to be part of this today. This is really not about learning the product. This is really talking on better improvements of in your implementing your GRC overall architecture. So what we'd like to do is focus on how to prepare for it ahead of time. But I'd like to introduce you also to what we do. First of all, product success managers for the SecOps and risk. It's where we support the client and the partners when they have technical issues or challenges with the product. We are with the client through the entire journey, if we can, and we're here to let them know that if they have an issue or a high ticket, then they can put us on it. But I'd like to introduce you also to my good friend Joggin, who actually manages most of the GRC SecOps product success as well. So Joggin.
Thanks, Rick. Hi, good morning all. As Rick said, happy to be part of the team. I've been with the GRC industry for last around 18 years. Now joined ServiceNow around 8 months back, but working closely with customers and product management. We're also happy to take if there is any product feedback specifically. So today's topic that we are going to talk about specifically on what we have seen, one of the most of the ask from customer about how do we set up, and we'll talk about that. And thanks Rick for the intro.
Thanks, Joggin. So Joggin and I are collaborating through this whole thing. So I'm going to be asking if he has input and vice versa. So we're just going to get through this as soon as we can. And again, this is not about the product learning. That's not the objective here, is to have a really understanding of setting up good GRC practices before you put it into the tool. So everybody can see my deck, yes? I'm assuming, okay. So usually we give our little spiel on, understanding people's maturity model. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that when they come into our, into utilizing our tool anyways, is where are they in their overall maturity? Are they still doing spreadsheets where they're at the manual process? Do they have some of their things in place? Maybe they do have some automation, so they're between 1 and 2, and of course, everybody wants to get to 2 to 3. That's the reason, why we have provided good value to customers like you. So as you come into here, usually all this is green, but the areas that we kind of focus and help you is to learn the business case. So we want to say, what's your roadmap? Are you just going to be doing governance type of documentation? Are you going to do assessments? Are you just doing vendor risk? You know, we just need to understand the business case, right? But then in the middle of all that, the road mapping is so important to understand what you need. So the preparation and planning is more important than the other two at the end. This is where you make or break your implementation process, and that everything's going to work out the way that you're planning to be. Not to say that you're going to do it right the first time, but there's some fundamental ideas and items that you're going to have to be reviewing, and hopefully your partner, your company that's helping you, and also your leadership has an idea where you're going. Jagan, you have anything to add before I go on?
Definitely, right. It is like a foundation block, and also, as Rick said, and I have seen in my experience also, this is a place where you want to really set up your foundation in terms of, you know, the expectation and preparation of data. It's a crawl, walk, run phase, and depending on where you want to go and what's your maturity level, these two phases becomes very critical. And this will, as Rick said, this phase will either make or break the implementation. And we have seen very good success. Recent past, people are, you know, understanding that what is the importance of preparation and planning, either in terms of data, project management, governance of the data, and, you know, understanding stakeholders, so on and so forth.
Thanks, Jagan. All right, moving on. So when you come into these areas and you break it down further, right? It's really this section right here, define planning for testing. This is almost a reverse engineer approach where you're looking for the type of reports you're trying to provide to your leadership currently. Not to say that these are going to be all reports, because I think once you implement, you know, our tools and our platform, you're going to find other things that you're going, wow, I didn't know I could do that, right? So you're going to be adding more. But in order to really understand this, you start from what have you been reporting to your leadership, or in order to be effective in what you're doing. Once you understand that, then we reverse it back to then building your architecture around it. So hopefully anybody that's implementing should be asking you, what is it that you're producing today? And that's going to let us know sometime how mature you really are as to what are you doing? Are you just doing, you know, your policies? Are you just doing procedures? Are you doing monitoring where you're validating those procedures are being done? You know, the metrics. Most people don't even get that far. They're just saying, well, I made the policy, I made the procedures, and now it's been validated, we're doing it, right? But there's no checking and balances. So, questions? Anybody? Okay. Jagan, anything on your end?
Definitely, right. You know, there are two states in this, right? Typically, what we say is as is state and future state. Now, as is state is important to evaluate and understand where you are in your process or journey. Future state is where you want to go. Now, that will give you the delta, and that will give you a good planning of, you know, what kind of work that is required, what is the journey that you're going to take. What we talk to many customers here is to put your implementation journey. When you talk about implementation, it involves the project management, which group that you want to go, what kind of data sources that are required, and what kind of artifacts that you want to collect. It will give a clean white space in those areas where you have data, where you want to go. I think this is, again, as we said, people gone in these steps are seeing a lot of success in recent past, and even in earlier days. It looks like a standard, you know, kind of program management, but when it comes to GRC, it's little more advanced. The reason being, every company, every department looks GRC in a different lens, and the requirements are different. Although it looks like a normal standard practice of SDLC, but when it comes to GRC, it has more value.
Thanks, John. All right. So everybody knows the collaboration and handover. And the reason we're just showing these slides is it is the normal way of thinking. There's a consecutive way, there's a best practice approach. But what Ragan and I have sat together and we found some gaps of things that are being done outside that are not being done that's outside the tool. And that's what we're really focusing on. And we're going to get into that in a couple minutes. So I just drew this slide just because I really think the success is still back to what everybody sees. It's always the technology, your process, your people, and then definitely your strategies. So if you don't have all these things aligned, then you're not quite ready to really get a GRC implementation. You know, most people do want to try and do it, but you got to make sure the organization is aligned and that things are in place. So I'll give you for instance. So you say, I'm going to do a GRC because I've got to have an ISO certification in order to bid for this contract. And so then you go through the ISO and you start realizing, man, we don't have half of these procedures written, right? We just came in, we're using Google email for our business. We're encrypting stuff, I guess, you know, like we're supposed to. But in our own, you know, shared drive, we're not just sharing things. And we start realizing there's things that are not safe, right? So once they've gone through that type of ISO review, they realize that the people are there, right? The technology is there, they just use it every day. But what's not there is a process. Because if this thing got broken, if the office broke down or something, you know, not available, then there's no continuity. And that's where you start realizing some challenges. So want to have these 4 strategies in place. So that way, at least you know that you're going to be able to sustain business. And that's really what GRC is about, is to ensure that you have some integrity of the data, your continuity to ensure your business keeps moving. If you do have a type of business that is a 24/7 or an 8 to 5, and your availability, right, of the email, your calendar, to your customers, all those things. Okay, John? Yeah.
No, I think that is like typical, right? People, process, technology, and strategy is very critical for the success. Yeah.
All right. So where we're getting to the crux of this is we're pre-planning the work outside the implementation process. So this is the part that a lot of folks just, for some reason, they skip it, or they think about it, but they really don't do a lot of it. And then when they get into our tool, they realize, man, we didn't put some of this in place. So what I did was I sat with Joggin and I said, hey, let's do something small and let's see if we can put a real scenario in place. So what you're seeing right now is this right here are the controls that you want to use. Now, some of you are using COBIT, some might be using NIST, some are using ISO. So these are your actual controls you're trying to use. But you want to tie it to this categorization called asset management, right? So, so as you're working through this, you have to think, okay, what do I do in my asset management, right? And then the subcategories are either asset managers on physical side, the software, organization. So this is setting up your matrix for your procedures and for your policies, right? But then to the right, you have to look to the roles and say, I got a CISO, I've got an ISSM, you know, an ISSO that manages the policies, procedures. I've got the engineers to do the vulnerability assessments and to do the patching for me. I've got an application admin to making sure that there's proper access, and then I definitely get the user. I mean, so these are your just normal level roles, right? And then you've got your business units where you got your HR, finance, manages your portal, internet. That's definitely physical security and your enterprise architecture, right? And then you have the particular applications, whether they be payroll, human resource, you know, IT knowledge base, video surveillance, and access management, right? So we said to ourselves, if this is what we usually hear from the client is that, hey, this type of business I have, and I'm sure every one of you all have something like this in your business somewhere as a normal infrastructure, which I hope. Joggin?
Yeah, definitely, right. Here we are talking about one specific example, but if you look at both business and IT side, setting up this data and relating this data is very critical, and this will decide your success of the program, how you want to get the reports, outputs, and tagging of the data. I think we have gone through one specific example, but same example can be expanded across multiple business use cases, and this is where the mapping starts.
Okay. So then what we do is we took our, I'll try to blow this up a little bit more so you can see it. So here is what most business come to us and say, I need this to get into this, right? And now you can, so the ServiceNow folks that are helping and the partners understand this better, even though they don't probably do have the experience in this, but it's really figuring out where are all your parts, like your you do risk framework, your policy procedures, your authority, and then once you start implementing, you start seeing how all the data flows. The area we're focusing today is on the scoping, because without this, you're not going to be able to do any of these. Even though you're going to have to tie in your controls, your objectives, your indicators for monitoring and everything else. But without setting this key area proper, everything else is going to be a challenge. And this is where we always come back and helping customers and trying to understand what happened and why things aren't creating properly, things aren't rolling out properly for them and all, is because some reason the entity wasn't built correctly, or it may have to be modified a little bit.
Hi, Rick. This is Charles. There's a really quick question to the team that's out there, all the customers. Are you guys actually able to see the slide pretty well? Does Rick need to zoom in a little bit, or are you guys good to go? I'm going to take silence as you guys are golden.
Okay. And they have a copy of the slides too, Charles, right?
I'll send them after the call.
Okay,
but
okay. And I can zoom in just to make sure.
Yep.
But if anybody can see that, you got your entity type and your entity classes you have to build. John, you have anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, definitely, right. I think one thing that's a big differentiator for ServiceNow is if you set up these entity types and classes properly, when you associate this risk framework and control objectives, the instance of controls or individual controls and risk statements will be automatically created based on the way that you associate. That's where this becomes very critical. Just imagine that you have some access management control and you have around 500 applications. In a normal GRC tool, people have to go and associate each of those risks to each of those applications, if you will. In ServiceNow, that is the specialty. If you set it up entity type and entity filters properly, if we associate control objective at entity level, and system will automatically create those instances of controls for those individual applications. That's the power of ServiceNow and the power of scoping entity in the right way.
So I know maybe I should have put this slide out first to you guys, but this is just a reference for y'all to see. I wanted to try to tie in, our overall scenario to what we have to do here. But I've also given you a larger one of this in case you just want to see that. Okay. Now, going to next, this is a more simplified version of how to build our GRC Foundation Model, right? Where you have your objective, your applications you're going to be having, the type of organizations. You can have multiple organizations with your company as well, the type of services that you provide, the process, and all. So you can see that the entity type has to be built at the top level with entities in order to then everything else ties into this. So without this, like I said, you won't have your rollup. So this is a more simple version of looking how entity plays as a major role against all your type of assessments and control information to be connected into your whole GRC ecosystem. Jagan?
Yeah, I think one point I want to add here, right? It is not that you have to always associate risk statements and control objective at entity type level. Many times, if you want to have localization, you can still create individual controls and risks at the entity level. That is still possible. Here, what we are showing is the automation, the possibility of automation of associating risk statement and control objective at the entity type level, which will automatically create an instance of controls and risks. So both are possible, but the power of ServiceNow, when you have a CMDB view, right? If there's a maturity, automatically those entities will be created. Automatically, the risks will be associated and controls will be associated automatically without having to do any administrative work. This keeps your GRC governance pretty simple and straightforward.
Thanks, Johnny. So then the next slide, what it does for you is it lets you see all the tentacles where the entities are going to be provided. So that's why entities is so important, because you see they are such an integral process of the whole GRC ecosystem. So that's why we believe this is a really important subject to talk about today, because most of the controls and attestation and everything else, they're pretty self-explanatory. But this can be a challenge for most people, for most people to try to get their grips around it. So, all right. So what we did was we took the overall template here, right? And we said, okay, let's go ahead and make some entities out of it and what it would look like if we were to tie it in. So this chart gives you that this whole area is focusing on here. So I blew that out for you all. And then what we did was we create two entity types, Smith & Rowe Business Unit and Smith & Rowe Application, right? But then under the application is and that's not an application like a system, but it's a placeholder for any application. And then the business unit, it could be business unit A, business unit B, whatever you like, right? That you can put under here. So you have a placeholder like a folder, and then think of it like as a big folder, and then you can have many folders under it. So that way you can aggregate. So at home I have a folder called house improvement, right? I got a subfolder for windows, air conditioner, plumbing, all the things that I have to fix in the house. But it's all, my family knows Dad always needs the home improvement folder, right? So that big folder, and that folder gets bigger and bigger the longer I stay at my house too. And I think you all understand that. And then we have a class we built because we want to apply the NIST controls because we're going to be doing the NIST assessments against it. So we made an organization NIST class, and we made a system one. So the organization is to say we're going to be using NIST controls overall as this, but specifically for the system, we have one as a placeholder. Jagan?
Definitely, right? This one we created manually. Again, right? If there's a CMDB, you can link any of the ServiceNow tables to automatically create this data. Many times your application could be in some of the CMDB tables, and there are options to create called entity filters. You do not need to create individual applications. Moment that table gets a new record, system automatically gets created. Now, all of these things are our part of GRC community. Charles, we can send one PDF deck where if the customers are not part of the GRC community, I would definitely suggest for you to go and register. It's a free community where there's a lot of discussion that is happening. We'll also get a lot of videos and discussions happening around setting up entity types, entity classes, so on and so forth. I would highly encourage for you to go and register into GRC, ServiceNow GRC community there.
And at the end of this, I'll put a summary one together with all those links. And I also will provide the PDFs to Charles so that he can send that out to the entire group. Okay. All right. So far we took the sample scenario we did, and we have now provided you the information. So when you go and overlay it back to the chart that we have shown before, our entity types are sitting up here. The control objectives are sitting down here because that's what's been provided to us. And then the application, right, which is a human resource app. So you can see that these things have already been set up and put in place to prepare for when you go and implement it into our tool and all. All right. And then the next picture is to show you that we did create these entities in here. So here's the two entities that we had put in. And then I'll show you in the demo too as well. And then the two entity type tied to the entity classes. So let me switch over to my thing here. So the entity types here. So here's our two entity types. And if we go inside the type here, you can see that the HR application is inside here as well, along with the the control objectives won't be here for this one. And then if you go inside the actual application, we put the human resource one in here that we provided. And if we go inside here, sorry, I was trying to get to the controls.
There are downstream controls in the relation tab.
The downstream? Okay, thanks. So we then added the two controls that have been inside the spreadsheet there for CM-8 and PM5. So those were the two that were inside of this spreadsheet right here. This is where you get the CM8 and the PM5 for this one particular item, right? And when you go inside of here, what you'll see on the control is we provided all the information like this. And then that way you can go and do all your attestation and all your exception rules against those items. So having this set up properly provides you the ability then to reuse some of these items when you go and try to apply other applications in here as well. So I hope that made sense. So what you're seeing now is when you have your entity, you've got your human resource down to the controls. And then once you open the control up, it already created a control area for you in here. So I know this looks pretty simple, but as you can see, if any one of you all have gone through this, this is not a simple task to do. There's a lot of conversations back and forth, you know, to understanding how to build this properly. But we simplified it to try to build something to make things a little more sense to you guys. So that when you're thinking your way through from a matrix that looks like this and trying to create it down to something that is easily understood is what we were, the scope of our talk today was. John, you have anything you want to add?
Sure, I think one more kind of point here, right? You know, if people are using UCF as a data source, UCF provides a lot of content, and we have the relationship with UCF. If you subscribe to UCF, all of these instance and policies, procedures, everything will be automatically created. Your work is to just to map, and those individual control instances will be created. And if you want to do a manual data setup, that also can be done. Now, what we are seeing, I want to just give an example, right? Last week, I think 2-3 weeks back, we were working with one customer, myself and Rick, right? They understood the power of entity, but the discussion took almost a week. The reason being, if you set it up right, each and every department that can be of take the benefit of GRC and the power of entity setup, right? You have to talk to compliance department, risk, audit, security, depending on how large or how small is your team. So getting this consensus is very important, and it does not mean that you have to wait for long. You can start setting up simple. Our approach for all of you started top-down approach instead of bottom-up. Many of the areas, many of the customers start with bottom up, saying that I want to convert my current setup into the system. That's not a good idea, right? You can start with top down, start with, departments, types of servers, if you do not have individual applications in IT example, IT GRC example, you can start with Windows as one type, Linux as one type, start from that and go down. That's where your entity type starts setting up. And same thing is applicable if you're talking about departments of line of business. You can start from top or regions or states, so on and so forth. That will give you you will see how is your maturity, whether there are gaps. You can start setting up from there. And system provides that flexibility starting from top. Also, entity has hierarchy. We can look into the data. You can set up hierarchical entity types. You can start with regions. Regions will have countries, or maybe countries will have states, so on and so forth. Province, you can go down to that level. That also is one more way of setting up data here.
All right, so Charles, looks like we kind of met our halfway point. I guess we did pretty good getting up to, so that way we can start having conversations with people on the phone here. Is that your goal?
Yeah, definitely. If there's any other items or questions that you guys wanted to just kind of clarify right now, Rick and you guys can. Outside of that, we could open a floor up to customers or any questions about what was covered so far, any points of clarification, even if there's a particular area that you kind of wanted to just kind of recover. I know there's a lot of good information there, but we do have the two experts here, so give you guys that chance there. But I see that, Rick, you're on slide number 13. Did you have a couple more that you want to go through before you open up? You can keep going if you want.
No, this was just an overall, just what our goal was today. I just wanted to leave it open in case somebody wanted to refer to something here from the matrix.
Okay. All right, so we're going to open up the floor to the customers here. So any questions from the field out there? Anyone who's getting started with GRC, have some key questions for Rick and Jargon here. The floor is all yours. And also too, Rick, you guys can ask some key questions too of the customers if there's areas that you guys may think that you want to get some answers or kind of help from there.
Yep. Anybody?
Yeah, my question would be, Charles and Rick, to all of you, right? Sometimes what happens is, in a hurry of trying to meet a deadline, you would not have started setting up entities. You would have directly started up setting policies and directly associating controls to that. That is fine. You can still go back and start doing some of this work if you are in a specific area or journey. Right? I would suggest definitely to relook. The other important aspect here is, this is very critical when you want to start rolling up, right? Tomorrow, if you want to use risk management, and GRC, the risk is a big topic nowadays, right? Resiliency, risk, and so on and so forth. This setup is going to be really, really helpful for rolling up of the risk. And as ServiceNow, as we are releasing new products, our kind of enhancement will depend on some of this data setup, if you will. I just want to highlight that point, and you can start thinking around. And even outside this call, right? If anybody wants to discuss a little bit more detail, we are happy to get on a call. You can work with Charles. We'll talk about if you want to have some special discussion around this topic or any of the data setup point of view. We are happy to discuss that.
That's a very good point too. One of the things I like about working with Rick and Jagan is that if there's some complex conversation needs to be had, and you guys have some particular use cases as a customer, and may not feel so comfortable talking about it within an open forum, they've always been willing to jump on a call to kind of have a good dialogue around that piece and kind of help you figure it out. Like, what's the best way to kind of approach X? So I definitely appreciate that. So any questions that you guys may have right now for the team?
Well, I do. I have a couple questions for the team then. Anybody doing something called CMMC coming up soon, or DFARS 171? That's in the audience today. No. Okay.
Oh,
Does
Jane.
Go ahead.
Looks like Jane raised her hand.
All right. Can you elaborate, Jane, a little bit? Why you're even looking at it?
I don't have those kind of details, but I understand from our management that that's going to be our next control framework that we're going to be introducing through the UCF.
So I'm going to go ahead and take a brave approach on explaining that challenge everybody's going to have. And if no one, has a thought about it, I'm going to show you why this can be a really a challenge. What's happening is that if you've got, let's say today, you've got your matrix built like this, and you're going to need another one over to the side here just for the DFARS -171, or they call it now CMMC, right? And the thing is, this thing is a moderate level assessment. Now, if anyone's not doing any of this, of the NIST stuff today, the mapping of this is going to be quite challenging, because every one of the items, by the way, I got this from the Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, today, and that is still at a 10,000 feet level. But the assessment of a DFARS is at a 5,000 feet and below. So it gets down inside of like this. Even though we see the ISO, ISA, these items, these are still very high level questions. It is only when you get down to the NIST area is when they say, so I'll give you an example. ISO usually says, do you have an access control procedure in place? The answer is yes. NIST will say, well, give me the 3 procedures to ensure that you're meeting access control. So now you're having to spell out everything down to the T. So to try to now bring the DFARS 171 or CMMC control objectives into it will mean you have to sit and map what you've already done, whether it's ISO, down to the level of the NIST requirements for the DFARS. But then your attestation and your indicators are going to have to be updated, because it's going to go a lot deeper. So then that means you're going to have to add more indicators or add deeper attestation documents to validate, but you have to also add in those particular NIST items that's going to be inside of whether your asset management, your configuration management, access management, all of the 18 major families of cyber, is what you're going to have to complete, put in there. And then not everyone in your organization is going to have to do it. Now, because most of the DFARS, out of the 18 families, 14 of them are being asked. The other 4 are not being used. And most of them are technical requirements. So you're going to be focusing toward a lot of your IT systems, because really it's about ensuring your data at rest and your data in transit that's being protected at all times. And you have to validate that. So when an assessor comes in to review your DFARS, they're going to want to see those particular controls, the particular artifacts and evidence with the attestation. And if you're doing any monitoring, which is continuous monitoring, you're going to have to show them through your indicators, right? So to try to bring that framework into your existing architecture, it's going to be, it can be done, but it's going to be a challenge. And so this is why we sit back and we try to talk about the entity, because you're going to have to go back and bring your old blueprint back out and see if there's going to be any changes that have to be made, to your entity. As you can see, once you touch something, then the other things are going to be affected. So this is one thing that's been coming up a lot in ours, is now people are starting to bring the RMF process into it, or the DFARS 171/CMMC compliance requirement into their existing items. We had one of the big audit firm called us the other day and said, we have to bring in, these items in. We've been doing it really at a governance level, but how do we get down to the lower level? Anybody seen this as a challenge or preparing this already? Or you can share maybe you're doing it and it's working well for you. It'd be nice to hear how well it is doing for you if you are implementing this. Anybody have comments on this? Okay, quiet audience today. All right, sounds like maybe we hit a good point, or maybe items that were just refreshing for you guys, which is that'll be good if you're already doing it. Okay. All right. I don't have anything on this end for right now. Jogging?
I think from my side, I think looks like this may be resonating very well. But as I said, if there are any other questions even outside this call, please reach out to Charles. Happy to discuss around some of these topics.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask, Rick, is if you could show, you guys talked about the community section. Could you just navigate there really quick and just kind of show, highlight that?
Yep, let's do that. So if you're not on community a day, please join it, right? And of course, I have slow internet. So here, if you guys are able to join them, there's a lot of rich data. You can come in here and you can even type what we've been doing today. And you can see that a lot of things show up about entity. Talking about profiles, the entity, the objectives, and all. And sometimes when you click inside, you'll see what people's conversation are, and sometimes you actually see the videos on them as well in here. Along with that is what I did was I went out to YouTube, right, and I type entity for ServiceNow, right. And then it came up with these items. And then what I did was I just took the title and I would copy them back into the, so if I did this and went back into the community, right? I think I can get close here. Of course, it's not going to show like I want to, is it? Usually the videos will show up here and then you can get right into it. And when you click in the items, but I don't know why I was having a problem here. Yeah, so if there's a video here, it actually will show you. And then you can actually download, if they gave you some things, you can download the documents here as well. I was able to find them this weekend easy. I don't know why. Right now I'm having some challenges. But there are some great ones out there, as you can see, that does talk about them. NC scoping. This one's actually on the profile. Let me see if I can get it. I'd have to have a slow internet, don't I?
No, I think you're not the only one. There's a couple of issues going on, I think with CenturyLink and other areas, so it might be.
Yeah, there is. I saw something on the news about it. Yeah. So I want to get to this one that showed this. Here it is. And usually it matches that title. If it's out there, then it should. There it is, right there. So you click on here. You can see the videos in here, right? And then the download of the actual PDF, I mean the presentation sitting right here. So you can actually download it. So this is an example of what you see on YouTube. If it's out here, then you can go community and bring this in. But at the same time, community, as you can see, they have discussions all the time. And if you're on the GRC one, you'll get blurbs of stuff that people are talking about every day. So I hope that helps, Charles.
No, that's great. That's very perfect. I love the fact that we're starting to put up more and more of those videos, and then being able to download some of the material that is portrayed in those videos is great. So that basically helps customers tremendously. I know from a lot of the customer calls that I've had, especially the check-ins, there's been an appetite for good, easy to use / digest videos on key topic areas, especially with GRC. So it helps to build up that foundation so they can get it done right. So thank you for showing that. Okay. So right now there's about 14 minutes left, and I'm going to kind of open up again for any other questions or comments. Now, if there aren't any questions or comments, it's perfectly okay. We can end early, but just know that if any questions do come up for anyone who either attended today's session or are looking at this video, feel free to reach out to me, Charles, and I will try to get that information over to Rick and the team to try to get some answers for you. But I want to make sure that you guys had a chance to have asked any of those questions that you guys may have at this time. So I'm going to leave it open for the next 2-3 minutes to see if anybody wants to either provide a comment or a question. If not, then we can adjourn early today.
And then I'll make a summary folder, deck with all it says links, and then I'll just put it all inside here when I send you an updated version, Charles.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Well, if there's nothing else, I thank you so much for inviting us, Charles. I know that Jagna and I, when you asked us about 2 months ago, I thought, what would we be able to talk about? Because, it's so much that we can express that as good. But then he and I sat down and said, what's been the most problematic issue that either when we get called in from clients or starting off a new project and doing all this is the entity. For some reason, it's been such a real challenge for folks. And of course, we'll reach out to partners and ask them. And it's funny how every one of them have their own approach of doing it too as well, right? So we also thought about bringing some of the partners in to the product management team and just have a level set as to, let's make sure our messaging is going out clear on entity scoping. Maybe someone's got a good way approach to doing it. They want to share. Maybe we can improve our documents. Maybe our documentation, is missing some items or something, right? So we were intending to get that done, and maybe there's ways to improve it.
Is there any key areas that might be changing or coming up in Paris that customers might need to be aware of within GRC?
As far as I know, and John, let me know if you found something else, but exceptions. Entity exceptions is a new item. We're going across talking to multiple clients that are using VR and then integrating the exceptions over to the GRC when they're doing indicators or monitoring of, right? And be able to say, well, these things don't really apply, or these do, but except for these items, right? So exceptions is something that we're building into there today. And I think some of the ACL things are getting more granular in the GRC. So Charles, did you hear anything about that on the ACLs or anything?
No, I have not.
And Jagan, have you heard anything?
Yeah, we are getting into granular entitlements. That is going to happen in future. But especially for Paris, Charles, to answer your question, we are releasing there are a lot of enhancement that's happening high level. If you want me to give, we are releasing a lot of enhancement in audits management. The other big enhancement is around vendor risk. We already have vendor risk management enhancement. There is something called, typically, that evidence collection is a challenge for many of these companies, spend a lot of money and effort. We are releasing a module within some of this, right? It's going to be in the new SKU called evidence collection, which is going to help you for collecting evidence for either external regulators or auditors, and system can automatically schedule. Please keep in tune with the product roadmap for evidence collection. And that input came from customers like you, where people are spending a lot of time and effort to collect evidence and present it to the regulators on a periodic basis or external auditor. That's one important aspect, Charles, that is being released. Also, risk management, we have this automatic indicators where, today risk assessment high level is you have to go and do manually input the data for risk assessment. It will give a scoring, and we are also automating that in terms of, system can automatically change the risk rating on the change. If there's any change that's going to happen anywhere in the system, you can automate that using indicators, risk indicators. And we're using releasing some of these accelerators for RMF. That's also one more thing that's going to come in Paris. So those are some of the high level items that are going to come in Paris, Charles.
Great. No, that sounds like good stuff. And then the only other question that I had, probably more basic, is just, are there any key areas that a customer should focus on and have in place and be leveraging well enough to then take on the GRC module? Are there any kind of order of operations, just high level, that you guys can think of that just says this is the best path to success in leveraging and using and implementing GRC? You should have these 3 basic fundamentals down and down hardcore.
Definitely, right. There is, if you go to the forum, there is one kind of a community event that myself and Eric did, which has a checklist which talks about where you are. It's a self-explanatory checklist which can talk about how you are in terms of maturity and where you want to focus. But if you ask me 2 or 3 areas, one is definitely entities, the core, as we discussed. Entity is number 1. Number 2 is what we call it as, GRC data governance, which is again outside the system, right? You have to have one thing that I've seen customers, and myself and Rick would have seen, is customers failing is they will try to focus only on one department. They'll just forget that you are going to use the same tool for audits or risk or compliance or security or privacy. So keeping that idea open, having consensus, that's the second one. Third one is when you set up, I would suggest is, as I discussed during our meeting, is think about top-down approach. Do not think about bottom-up. Right? Bottom-up is going to be rework and failure. Those 3 would be the high items, Charles, if you ask me. Right? Those 3 topics, right? Entity types, thinking of top-down approach, and getting consensus from other departments. That will set you up right. The data is very critical, right? As you have, it's like, Gigo machine, right? So if you set up the data properly, have right governance, then you can start using the power of ServiceNow platform and GRC as you go further.
Great. No, that's
for my part, Charles. I think the pre-planning, looking like Jogging was saying, the overall architecture, right? Sitting down and documenting this on paper, walking through scenarios of it, doing workflows of it, and making sure it matches to what you want. Because by the time the partner is actually helping you, or if you're self-implementing, then at least everybody's on the same page. Many times I hear people discussing things, and it wasn't really written down in a way that everybody was agreeing to it. I think we all can talk GRC level and be very high level talk, but unless we actually get it down on paper and just draw it out and then run through the scenarios, it's where you can find the challenges you might see, in here. Because the tool has allowed you to do so many different things. You can customize it, you can change all the configuration, which is, that's fine. And you can do some very imaginative things the way you're monitoring things, right? 300 clients later, we start realizing they're all doing it a little bit different, which is a good testimonial of our tool, is that we're not pigeonholing anyone inside here. That's why when you look like, I'll take an easy tool like Microsoft Word. Anybody that does a proposal writing and editing and everything, I guarantee you, they know more about Microsoft Word than I'll ever use, right? The merging and everything else about it. So there are so many ways that ServiceNow has allowed the customer to do it the way they want to do it. But at the same time, it can be very dangerous too, because you're doing so much, and maybe you're going down a path you didn't realize that it doesn't work that way, right? Because allowing it looks simple, it looks like it's working the way you want to, but then you start putting your performance analytics tools and reporting together, and you're realizing it's not aggregating or rolling up like Jogging was saying. So I think writing down, testing it out before you actually implement it is the real key to your success.
I love that. I love that. That really, that's the number one thing I've seen when, especially having you speak with some of the customers that I have, that you greatly helped them out with and understanding, taking that step back and going through that process, which also too leads itself up to how you guys were offering earlier, if there was any additional need or questions or need like a separate session.
Yeah.
If any of you customers on the phone or who are either here or just listening to this recording, if you need some assistance in just that basic component in the beginning, it'll save thousands of hours and countless nights of just, did we really understand what we thought about from this? Is everyone on the same page? And how do we kind of work through that and make sure we get that correctly? These two individuals definitely have had some really great virtual whiteboarding sessions. I've watched it happen where it just helped to mind map and put things into perspective. So hopefully you guys understand that as well. I don't know, Rick, if you want to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I did. And Charles, thank you so much. And I know you've been a great advocate. It also puts your requirements and your roadmap to what you want when you are talking to your partner. Do not let your partner steer the conversation, you know, as much as possible, because I think they're there to help. But if they're not hearing what you want, they're going to go back to what they have been implementing, what they're used to doing. And it's not going to say it's wrong. It's just that their way of doing it. But it allows you to elaborate and push the partner to think a way that the way you're wanting to implement it and the way you see the world of GRC, right? Because without your input, they're just going to go back to doing what is normal for them. And sometimes normal for them could be something that maybe is a small glitch that they could have corrected. And then we're finding it out later. So take control of your own destiny, I think, on writing the stuff down. So thank you so much for having us, by Charles, and the rest of y'all.
No, thank you for for taking the time today, and we look forward to the second session, which will happen in September. Thank you, customers. Thank you all for attending and participating in this office hour. I will be sending the recording as soon as I get it, as well as the survey. Please feel free to take a couple of minutes to let us know how we did. If there's other topics, areas that we should have covered that you didn't think that we covered very well, let us know. We love the feedback. And also, too, again, definitely when you speak with your CSAs, your customer success advocates that are assigned to you, don't hesitate, don't hold back. Let them know during your check-ins what other office hours you might want to see. It's what keeps us going. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your hopefully shorter week. Have a good time. Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Thanks, Charles.
Bye.